The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for joining me for today's class where we're going to look at virtual estimating and how to create a virtual estimate. I will try to be very respectful of your time. I understand that a lot of you are attending the International Builders Show, so I'll try to keep this at the half-hour mark for everyone so you can get back there and look through all of the content that's there today as well. So I'm going to go dive right into the content today and look at doing an actual virtual estimate for you so you can understand how we bring in the information and how you can visually see it on the screen and count everything at the same time and then pass it off to different formats. So let's get started. To bring in an object that you want to get a material count on, we would come here to the File and Import option. Under import, it gives us a number of different import capabilities. I can bring in a PDF, I can bring in a CAD file, or I could bring in a trace image, meaning a JPEG or a bitmap. So if someone's scanned something and wants a quick estimate on it for you. The process for either one of those choices is the same. So we'll use a PDF. Just know that you'd have the same capabilities with either a CAD file, DWG, DXF, or if it was a JPEG or a bitmap. The only difference with JPEG and bitmap is because they're scanned, they're not going to be the best quality, but while I'm going through the PDF, I'll show you how you can improve that quality too. So I'm going to choose Import PDF File. And then back out on my desktop, I have some options here, and I will bring in one for us to use. When you bring in a PDF, or say this was a JPEG or a DWG, when you're bringing it in, you have to be conscious of what the data is that you're bringing in. If it was a scanned in image, the more you zoom in, as you can see I'm doing here, the worse that PDF is going to look because they scanned it and that made it up of tiny little pixels on the screen. So a JPEG, that's as good as it's going to get. If they created it in an actual CAD project like Envisioneer or AutoCAD, it could be a vector PDF. And the added bonus is for those, the more I zoom in, the better it looks. And I can snap to every one of those corners. So the best case scenario is bringing in a PDF that was created in a CAD product or bringing in a DWG or DXF. But you can also bring in, just as I showed you zooming in there, a scanned in image as well. We'll still be able to read them and you can still bring them in. When you bring them in, they could be to any orientation like the one you see on your screen here. It's going in a portrait lens and we want it to be landscape. So over here we have angle. So I can turn that around as I need to and it will rotate it. The button over here to the right allows you to pick the angle. So imagine, if you will, someone scanned in an image and brought it to you, and you can see when you bring it in here, it's off on a skew, not a perfect 90-degree corner. You could even pick the angle and straighten it up with the tools that we provide you, so you can perfect that imperfect PDF or scanned image. The next is scale. When you bring in an image, you want to make sure that you're bringing it into scale. So we can rescale the image. I'm going to zoom in on some dimensions here. So the plan shows that this is 10 feet. This little box right here allows me to pick 2 points. So I can pick to the end of that extension line and then left click to the end of that extension line and tell it that that represents 10 feet. So I'm calibrating this image to the right scale, and then I'll click OK. And then it rescales it to 1 to 48, a quarter inch equals a foot. I can scale it in the X and in the Y direction. So again, imagine that scanned in image. If it's really stretched out, you can scale it in the X and scale it in the Y value to bring it back into a nice square image again. So even if you have a lousy image that you're trying to bring in to get a material count of, we give you the tools and opportunities over here to straighten it out, scale it as you need to. The other thing you can do is crop. So I'm going to crop just around the image that I'm bringing in, just this piece of the floor plan. I don't need the elevation, the roof plan, and the second story at this point. I just need to start with that ground floor because that's going to be the basis around my first count of materials, those walls, those doors, those windows. So I can trace over those. Everything that's outside of the blue box is going to be cut away. I'm just bringing in what I want to concentrate on. You could certainly bring in the entire image if you wanted to. I just like to crop it to simplify. And then I dim it down. By bringing this over, this image is going to start to appear washed out. That allows me to see what I'm bringing in and what I've already traced over. So if I bring this in kind of washed out, it's almost like it's underneath a piece of onion skin paper. And as I trace over top of it, I'm bringing what I'm estimating to life. So once I've set the rotation and the scale and dimmed down the image and cropped it, I've used those tools to make this the most accurate image I can to bring in and base my materials on. So then I just hit insert. And a copy of that original PDF attaches to my cursor, and I left click to place it here on my screen. It's here that I can start doing the estimate. I'm going to come down here to the bottom of the screen and use this zoom window tool to blow it up nice and big on my screen. Now I start using the estimating tools. I want to start estimating the walls. So picking on the walls tool, I see all of my catalog of different wall types. These catalog of wall types are assembled products. So when I pick on a sided wall, so I'm going to choose 2x6 cement board siding, that's like a container. When I pick it, I'm going to get 2x6 construction, some cement board siding, there's going to be some drywall. It knows all of that when I start to trace around. So when I move my cursor over top of the PDF I brought in, I'm going to right click and say insert by baseline. The baseline gives me one line that I want to trace around, this outside line. And then I just come around the image, picking to the outside corners as I go, and it automatically starts drawing. And I'm just going to come through there and put that in as a corner window all the way through till I get to my last corner. After I picked on each one of those corners, I right click and I tell it I'm finished. I've traced around by clicking just on the corners of the walls to the outside veneer of those walls. If I had traced around the inside face of the stud, or if I had inside face of the wall finish, I would tell it. I'm just indicating that the lines that I just drew by picking on those corners represent the outside edge. So now that when I click OK, it highlights that wall, the ones that I picked over top of, and already it knows when I go to Tools, Analyze, Generate a Project Estimate, the materials that go into those walls. So I can already see that I have blocking, framing nails, plate material, sheathing, studs, house wrap, sheathing tapes, staples, siding, insulation, vapor barrier, drywall, joint tape, gallons of paint, and baseboard. Just by bringing in that PDF, picking a container from the side that said 2x6 construction and cement board siding, it assembled all of these materials. And as I picked along here, it automatically gave me the materials I needed. So looking at that report again, if I come back out here to generate that project estimate, how did it know that I needed 92 and 5/8 studs? How did it know that those were 8-foot walls and I needed that pre-cut stud? If I come up here to settings and building locations, this is the information that you can use before you start tracing to type in the wall height. Once it knows that wall height and you give it the lengths of those walls by picking on those corners, it automatically uses that to frame that wall as it goes and drop in those 8-foot studs for me all the way along. If I had put in here that this was 9 foot 1 1/8, I would get the next pre-cut stud length that's available. By looking at this wall, right-click, look at its properties, I can see all the information that it's assembling. It knows to frame this wall and use a 2x6. And just by putting in that 2x6, that 2x6 has information behind it as well. It stores all of the purchase lengths that are available for that 2x6. So there's that 92 5/8 pre-cut stud length. It grabbed it when it was looking at the studs. It said, I will use you, you're the right length. If it was a 9-foot wall, it would have come down to the next pre-cut stud length and used it. It knows those heights, and it has them published here, the length of that board, so it knows to use them. And each one of these boards has rules set to it as well. So when I'm looking at these pre-cut studs, look down here, only used for studs. This 10-foot boards cannot be used for blocking or plate material. Don't send any 10-foot boards out for plate material. Send a mix of 12s, 14s, and 16s. When I come to an 18-foot board, don't use it for blocking header, sill, or plate material. It's an expensive board. So each board length can have rules set to it so that if you know you only want to ever send out 16-foot lengths for board for plate material, you can set up that rule. Tell it to ignore the 14s and the 12s. So each board length is intelligent as well, so it knows what length to use and intelligently puts that in the list. We saw trim in the list, and that's because each wall, as I'm assembling it and drawing it over top of that PDF, is also inserting trim. So it gave me lengths of MDF baseboard. And when I punch a hole in the wall for a window or a door, it'll also give me casing around those openings and a sill. So you can also have chair rail and crown molding. Whatever you need, it will automatically assemble it here and take it off for you. The last tab here, quantity tab, this is where all those different materials got assembled. The drywall, the sheathing, the cement board siding. You can add as many assembled products as you need or remove them. So if you don't supply drywall, remove that. It doesn't have to be in the list. This can be personalized to the products that you carry and you want to have. So if you have someone doing all your drywall work, you don't need the number of sheets, you could take that right away. Okay. I'm going to punch some holes in that wall, all the walls here, by putting in some doors. So there's a double door there at the back. I'll just left click to place that in. There's an entry wall there, and it's got a single door. So I'll just grab a door and place that in as well. And then we have a series of windows. So you can see it's grab the item that you want to take off, windows, go over to the catalog, find the item that you need, and then just left click to place it in. Now, there are tools, if you need them to go in very accurately, I can right click here and say, insert this window exactly 2 feet from this corner, and it'll put there 2 feet in the corner. But if it's just for a material takeoff, you could left click and it doesn't matter if it's here or there, as long as it's in and it's going to frame around it. So you just go through, grab the items that you need, left click to place them in, and it automatically puts them in and counts them. If you don't quantify the windows, you still want to put them in so you get your header material, but we do give you the ability to say, don't include it. Uncheck. I don't want the windows in the material report, but I do need them to go in to cut that hole so I get my header material, my jacks, and my kings. So you can always show the window, but don't count it as well. Because the other side of this, if I go to view framing, display framing, you can see that it's actually framing everything as well. And I can even pop that into a 3D visual to fully understand how it's framing it as well. So not only is it taking it off by highlighting the PDF, it's actually building 3D framing as well so I can see it. And the beauty of that is that I can update and change anything. Back under here, under settings, building locations, not only does it set up your predefined heights, it also sets up your predefined framing. So it also set up that, as a default, frame the walls 16 inches on center with a double top plate and blocking halfway up. And it has a span table, so any openings that I cut into the walls, it will stipulate what the header material is in the jacks and the kings. If I wanted it to just be 16 inches on center with a double top plate, no blocking, I can update that and click OK, and it will update, and I won't see any blocking in my material list. But if I do need blocking on one or maybe two walls, I can add those in. I'm going to go to View, Framing Mode. That allows me to just pick a wall or two and then look at just the properties of those two walls and how I want to custom infill just those two walls. Don't refer back to the building locations. For these two walls, let's custom frame them. And in these two walls, let's put the blocking back in. Maybe we need it to lag some cabinets too. So when I click OK, just those two will have framing. And that's also the same for any openings. It'll follow the rules of that head sill jamb table that we set up to frame the openings. But if you have a point load coming right down on this opening, you might need to beef up this header. So you can take an individual opening and use a custom head sill jamb configuration. So instead of using what looks like might be just a 2x10 or a 2x8 there, I could say let's use a PSL header. And that PSL header configuration has jack stud, king stud, all the information behind it on how to frame that one opening, and it will update it. So if I go back out of framing mode, view framing, display the framing, we can see the PSL header. We can see the blocking just in these two walls. And that will be reflective in our material report. In our material report now, we will see the addition of the header, that PSL header. And we'll see that our blocking, we don't need as many boards. We only need four 12-foot boards for blocking those two walls. Okay, so everything is visual. So you can see it and understand what you're taking off. That's the true power of it. I'm going to get this out of that mode again. I'm going to add in a couple of more walls here to divide up our plan. I'll grab some interior walls. I've got a 2x6 load-bearing wall that'll start here and end off down here, and one that'll come up here and come up to our planned height here, and just clicking in there, it wants to put it there, and I'll just move that back in, seeing another corner, and I'll grab a 2x4 wall. This is a non-load bearing wall, so we can move our non-load bearing walls through, and I'll repeat that going through here as well. So now I have more walls in. I could even put just in a cased opening. So I don't need the window or the door, but I do need an opening in. So I can put in a 5-foot opening as an example, here and maybe here. Does the same thing. I'll get my material count on those as well. And it also gives me the ability to divide those up into rooms. So if I do ceilings. So if you do ceiling material, you could either do it framed or leave it unframed in just the drywall and put the framing and the ceilings in each room. That's the same for structural floor. I'll put a floor underneath here. We'll say that it's 11 7/8 TGI flooring. And that will also include the sheathing, OSB sheathing, sill plate, our band joists, our rim joists. And if I cut a hole in this floor, if I was to go down to the basement as an example, in a stairwell, it'll automatically frame around it with the opening header material that I put here. So when I click inside here, I'm going to structural floor by the perimeter. It'll put that material in, and I'm just going to turn on its visibility so we can see that framing. There's our framing. There's our floor joists running through. Now, with those floor joists, if I wanted them to go in the opposite direction, I could tell it to reorientate them. So instead of going up and down, I want them left and right, and click OK. And that will update them. And if this was a load-bearing wall underneath to support them, I could right-click and say, structural floor, insert a bearing line from here to here, and it will automatically cut the joists. And if I want them to overlap them by whatever distance, like I have there, or I could have them butting up against a beam below if I was using hangers. So everything is quantifiable. I'll put a roof on. Over in our catalog, I'll choose an 8/12 hip, left click, and I can see the roof lines coming through, but I'm going to turn off some visibility of different things so it becomes a little bit clearer for us. I'll even turn off that PDF. Here's our roof lines. It automatically put through. By picking on the roof overhang, I can modify that. So right now I put in one 8/12 hip, but as we know, roofs now, they're multiple pitches, multiple plate heights, different styles, all coming together in one roof. So each arrow that you see pointing to the individual roof surfaces contains information about plate height, pitch, and style. So if I pick on those arrows, it turns them green. And when they're green, I can look at their properties and update them to say, these two, instead of being an 8/12, are a 6/12. Or instead of having a 16-inch overhang, they're a 2-foot overhang. Or instead of being a hip, they're a gable or a mansard or a Dutch hip, or a custom multiple slopes up one side, or just 2 slopes, a double slope, or even arched. I'll just choose gable and click OK. And that becomes a gable end roof. And that's fully part of our material list. So if I look at generating the project estimate again, now I will see my ceiling material, my roof framing material, all gets added in there. That was being stick framed with rafters and ridge beams and subfascia material. And there's my sheathing, valley framing, drip edge, flashing, shingles, vent. So you can see how quick and easy it is to just trace over top of a PDF to get the data. And then in the background, because it's assembling all that product, it's dumping it right into a list for you. And that list can be simply took over to Excel or something like Buildertrend for your project management. Or if you're using a point of sale system, we can send it out to your point of sale system using Generate Quote. Generate Quote will start up our quote generator, which puts the list together, but it allows you to massage it if you need to. So if you got everything done and then you decided instead of using OSB, you were going to use zip product or plywood or something else, you can substitute the product and swap it out. Or you can get rid of things. If they decided that they're not going to go with crown molding, as an example, you could scroll down in the list and find your trim and get rid of any kind of trim that they won't be using, as an example. So here's our trim material. We're not going to be using any casing, as an example. I could right click and delete it. And then all I have to tell it is that I want to export it to my point of sale system. I give it a name, and then I pick my point of sale. You can see all the different point of sale systems that we do link in with. So yours is bound to be here if you are using a point of sale system. So you can find the one, and then I'll just use BizTrack as an example. Click OK. It puts it into a format that BizTrack can read, and then I can remove comments or add in comments, combine information if I wanted to, exclude different things, filter or group the information by their phases to get it into the situation where I want to see it when I go out. And then I just hit export, and it sends that data out in a format that BizTrack could read. and I would need an account ID to get into BizTrack, but then it would open that right up. So you can take that data and share it. We also share the data in different formats. So now that you've got this 3D model, you can also export it out to Javelin, CSD, MyTech, Boise BC Framer, Keymark Simpson, 2020 Design. So if you also have a kitchen design center, no need for them to redraw the model. Use your model. You export it out to them. They can open it up into 2020. They place all the cabinets, and then they can send it back to you. So those cabinets become part of the overall quote as well. We're getting down to the wire here of that half hour I promised to wrap up in. The other things that you can do is value add to for your audience. So if you're sending this out to a builder, each one of those walls can be broken down into wall panel diagrams. So I can say insert this panel, and it will give them a detailed breakdown of how to frame that front wall, where the studs are A's, how many of them they are, what the length is that they're cutting, your jack studs, header plate, cripple studs, everything there in a nice little diagram. So if you're looking to give them some value added information, those could also be homeowner projects. 2020 was the year of DIYs. If you do shed packages, you could draw the entire shed and then break it down into those individual panel diagrams. Here's your material. Here's a diagram of how to put it together. Here's the floor plan. Build yourself a shed. So that's the power of visual estimating. Not only can you take everything off and see it in a highlighted plan, you can also go in at any time and look at the 3D model to understand exactly where everything is going and visually see what you might be forgetting or where there may be issues lying in the overall plan. And that 3D model, because it is an intelligent 3D model, can be shared and sent to different programs, as I showed you as well. What I want to do for the last few remaining minutes that we have together is answer any questions that you might have on visual estimating. In the GoToMeeting console on the right of your screen, it gives you the opportunity to type in questions, and I'll be able to answer them for you live during our time together. So if you type those in, I'll be able to read them, and then I'll be able to answer them for you. So let me just look into our questions to see what we have. Can this be loaded onto more than one computer? Yes, the licensing agreement goes by user. So you'd have to have one license per user to be able to use the software. So yes, you can load it on different computers. And if you need to move them, we have the ability to activate the software on one computer and then deactivate it on another so that you can move the software between computers easily. Okay, next question. Can the diagrams be sent to a CNC machine? Oh, the panel diagrams. So if I come up here to Tools, Wall Panels, those diagrams that I was showing here that we have, those panel diagrams, if you will, we can send out the bill of materials from those selected panels. So that can be sent out. The actual materials, that can be sent out in a CSV format. So it depends on your CNC machine if those can be read by it or not. You'd have to do a test of that. But if you come up here to options, BOM from selected panels, that bill of materials goes in a CSV. You can test that with your CNC machine. Okay. And that looks like all of our questions. So I'm going to leave it for just a moment, just in case someone else has another question. and I can answer those live for you. So it was a quick rundown, 30 minutes of showing you quick and dirty how to bring in our original PDF that I'll turn back on again and turn everything on. Bringing in that original PDF to get as maximized information as we can so that that takeoff is going to be as perfect as possible. And then sending that takeoff out to a point of sale system, an ERP system, out to just something simple as Excel, or being able to share that actual model with different places as well. I'm going to just hold here for a second. And someone was asking for a copy of this presentation. Yes, we will send out, we'll put it up on YouTube for you, and we'll send you a copy of the presentation so that you can share it with your team if anyone else in your organization needs to see it. So I have your registration information. We will send everybody out a link so that they can see it as well. Okay, well, thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to understand visual estimating and how easy a concept it can be to be able to take off your list very quickly and efficiently and very accurately as well, right down to the staple. And so you can visually see that information as well. I hope you have a great day. And if at any time you do have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thanks everyone and have a fantastic day.